for joining us once more. I have an amazing panel with me today, and we're hoping that Usama will join us in a few minutes, as well as Kalam El. But we've got JC, we've got Odon LaFontaine, regulars on our talks. And of course, we have Paul Ellis. And Paul Ellis rose to fame some years ago, at least in our circles, for discussions on the Jerusalem Thesis with Mal. And yeah, Paul, really great to see you back live after several years away. Please tell us where you've been, what you've been up to, and of course you're busy with a very new project that you can perhaps talk to everyone about.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on, and thank you to Odon for passing on the invitation to me. Yes, this is the first podcast I think I've done for at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 to 3 years. So it's been a long time that I've been keeping my head down, but I haven't been idle. I've been putting my ideas into print, and I've produced a book which I'm looking for a publisher, and I'll either find a publisher or I'll publish it myself. I have a copy of it here so that one could have some sense of the scale of the project. It's about 660 pages, contains more than 3,000 references to the Quran and the Bible, and numerous other sources as well. And this is advancing my the thesis for which I have become somewhat renowned, which is that the Masjid al-Haram, the Kaaba, the house of God, the house of Allah, as it appears in the Quran, is in fact a reference to Jerusalem and not to Mecca. Mecca is a later invented. Mecca in Saudi Arabia was nothing to do with the Quran. If it existed at all, it was not the place that Muhammad was born, lived in, wanted to capture. All of that relates to Jerusalem. So it is. It's been 3 years of hard work putting that together, and I'm now pretty much ready to break cover on it.
Right. Does it overlap with what Odon's been presenting in his book? Because we've had Odon speak on his material several times over the last year or so. Like, is there overlap and also any differences that?
Oh yes, there's a lot. As we were discussing, I think before the live stream started, there's a lot of convergence now amongst we amateur historians looking at the origins of Islam and looking for the original intended meaning of the Quran. There's a lot of convergence. I think I don't expect that there will be very much, if anything, that Odon will say this evening that I would strongly disagree with. Well, we'll wait and see.
Okay. I agree. I haven't read your book yet, of course, and for a reason. But I've read your article, and I discussed it with you. And yes, there's a lot of overlap. The thing with your work is it's focused on Jerusalem in the Quran, Jerusalem in the Islamic narrative, whereas I didn't focus as much as you. I work on the big picture, and because of it, there are, I think many details about this Jerusalem thesis that I have not taken into account. And maybe I don't know of, but it will be the occasion to display them.
All right. Yeah. So Odon, you're doing the presentation today, and then Paul and yourself will talk about this, and then hopefully separately we can also then continue this in the future because it's a lot to discuss. And then Paul can also come on and talk about his book and his research, and I'm sure they complement each other, and we can try to hopefully together fill in all the pieces of the puzzle. We all seem to be on slightly different parts of the map, but we all seem to be, discovering different aspects of the map and then finding we all coming to the same sort of location at the end of it. And and JC, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the invite. And it is wonderful to be here and continue this exploration on the origins of Islam. So looking forward to this.
Okay, just a quick remark, Lloyd, before we start. I don't see any restream of our discussion on my channel.
Maybe apologies, Odon. Usama, welcome.
Peace and blessing. Hey guys, I have a special friend today. He's gonna join us. His name is Brother Yusuf. You may have met with him before. You may have talked with him before. And Yusuf is from Saudi Arabia. He's one of these bad people who left Islam.
Bad people.
Yeah, this bad guy here.
How you guys doing?
Hey there, we've met before. Hello and welcome.
Oh, yeah,
Thanks for
we've met
being here.
before. How are you?
Good,
So-
thank you. Real good.
I want him to sit and be part of our meeting today. If that's okay with you guys,
Sure.
grab a chair and sit
Let
next to me.
me, let me, let
I'll
me.
finish what you're doing and then grab a chair, come sit next to me.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing? I see a new face, or I don't see new faces.
That's Paul Ellis. You're seeing Paul Ellis. Paul, this is Usama. He's
Hello,
very
Osama
well-
and Yusuf.
He's very
Good
well
to
known in
see you.
apologetic circles.
See you?
He's written his own Quran. He translated the Quran himself. He's busy on a new translation, and he and I do a regular weekly show on the Quran and tafsirs, which is slowly destroying my brain cells.
Sorry, I didn't mean it, man. It just happened. This is part of life.
Yeah.
All right.
So-
I'm sorry for being late. I was on the traffic. I'm here in Indiana, and snow and traffic was so bad. But I'm glad I made it almost a little bit late. I apologize for being late.
Yeah. So guys, so shall we get started then? Odon, do you want to take the lead?
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
I don't have cream.
Pop. Yeah, here it is.
And Odon, I do apologize. I either seem to have made an error with the stream to your channel, or I did not set it up. What I can do is I will restream it to your channel we can set up to do a restream on your channel as a live, but at a slightly later date, if that's okay.
Oh.
So that I do
Thank you.
apologize.
Thank you a lot.
All right.
So tonight it's about Mecca. It's about Mecca and what we call the Jerusalem Thesis. The Jerusalem Thesis is the argument that Mecca is not described in the Quran. Rather, it is all about Jerusalem, and this is the core of Paul Ellis' work. But some researchers discovered it before him. And I want to pay credit to Dr. Edouard Marie Galez, who already published it in 2005, but in French. Some other scholars have worked on the topic. I'm thinking about Stephen Shoemaker and Robert Kerr, who also identified that it was not that Mecca was not described in the Quran, and rather it was Jerusalem. But the issue is vast, and so I think that the title, the Mecca question, is much more appropriate for describing this Jerusalem thesis, because it is not all about Jerusalem in the Mecca question. First of all, let's see what Mecca is in Islam. Of course, we all know it. It occupies a foundational role in Islamic sacred history, so within the Islamic narrative, and also in Islam. It is a key component of the coherence of the religion. So Mecca is supposed to have been, within the Islamic narrative, a religious, commercial, demographic hub. So it was centered on the figure of Abraham. Abraham was supposed to have lived here. It was the city of Abraham. There was a pre-Islamic pilgrimage. It is described at the center of an Arabian pagan pilgrimage. It was a city of commercial importance with the Quraysh tribe, so the tribe of Muhammad, who that is supposed to have settled in Mecca and has engaged in a long-distance caravan trading activity connecting almost the whole of the Middle East, from Yemen to the Levant, so Palestine, Syria, and so on, Iraq, and even maybe beyond. And there is also many descriptions within the Islamic narrative of Mecca being a city with a substantial population. So not a city of a few hundred people, but many more, because we see in the tradition, in the hadith, or in the, for example, in the tafsir, that Mecca was capable of supporting an army with horsemen. Some traditionists described 1,000 or even up to 10,000 horsemen. That is in Ibn Kathir. So it must have been a huge city.
Yeah. I have a question for Paul, since Paul's been out of the picture for a while. I'd just like the perspective. Maybe all of you can also add your thoughts. You've got the story of Hagar and Ishmael, and she's running around looking for water to give the child some water before he dies. And there's nothing. She's running up these hills looking for anything. And she's literally in the center of supposedly the world's oldest city. But there's nothing but desert there. So that's a contradiction. But do we take the Muslim account that Mecca is the world's oldest city and established for thousands of years seriously, or do we discount it? You know, and what's the implication of us doing either one of those things? Paul, maybe you can give us your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely discount it out of hand. There's not a... I don't want to preempt what Odin's going to say, but I'm sure he will make the point that in his own way, that there's not a shred of evidence that a place called Mecca existed on the site of Mecca in the time of Muhammad, or for that matter, for about 100 years after the life of Muhammad. So it's and thinking about how implausible it is that a large part of the ancient world, the Persian Empire, and a very large part, approximately half of the Byzantine Empire, probably more than half of the Byzantine Empire, would all be conquered by a group of 5 men who were all born and all raised in Mecca, and this would attract no attention during their own lives is an outlandish and it's a thesis that could be dismissed, I think, out of hand.
Hasn't academia challenged Muslims on this, Odon?
Sort of, but you see, most scholars don't want to engage Islam, actually. They discover many things that are absolutely destructive for the Islamic narrative, but they pretend it's not. Most of them are actually, I think, they are afraid of the consequences of what they have discovered. And but you see, there is something else to understand. It is not the role of scholars to engage Islam. Their role is to study history, to study Islam, to study the archaeology, and so on. And so I think it was Patricia Crone who said it to J. Smith. J. Smith asked her once, he was her student at the time, and he asked her, why didn't she go to the media, to the press, and why didn't she engage Islam? She had everything at hand with her research, and she replied that it was not a role, it was his. And so it might be the reason why we don't see scholars that much in the media. They prefer to focus on their studies.
Usama?
Now, I'll say quickly here. we sometimes think of the Muslim world as a very educated, very scholarly people who knows more about Islam than we think. When in reality, I met with some Saudi doctors in Egypt a good 20 years ago, doctors, medical doctors, who do not know jack about the Quran or Islam. And I'm sitting here next to Yusuf, and he shared with me something in one of my broadcasts in the past about the footstep from Abraham. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people eventually comes to believe it. The Muslim world believe the narratives which has been taught by the Muslims without questioning. We don't think about evidence of whatever we hear. What we hear is true. End of story. You come up with a new narrative, whatever you want to talk about, you're a liar. You're an Islamophobe. You're a liar. But what happened with my buddy Yusuf, and I'm going to say make him say it short and sweet. He lived in Saudi Arabia. He was in Mecca. He was at the Kaaba. And there is a place there, a secret place, which is called the foothold of Abraham. That is where Abraham stand up there to build the Kaaba and was carrying one of these big rocks to put up. And because he stood up on that piece of rock, his foot make a mark on that rock. Okay? Tell us, what did he say to your father and how did he react to you?
So yes, I was with the family, and I was maybe 10, 11 years old. And as a child, you have questions sometimes, as honest as, as the question that I was going to ask, not thinking of the consequences that's going to come afterwards. But I was asking him, like, if this is where Abraham stood and picked up a rock or a brick to build this Kaaba. First of all, it's good maybe 15, 20 feet away from the Kaaba now. So it's not by the Kaaba, but there is a
footprint,
like a footprint inside that. It's not a footprint, it's like a dent on a rock. So it's like the rock is it's like if you have a piece of clay and you have you put pressure in one spot and then you leave it to dry, it's gonna stay like that. So I said, if this is a footprint if Abraham was standing here and that's his footprint, where's his other foot? I was a child. I mean, it was a stupid question, but I needed an answer for it.
It's a very important question. It's an honest question. Yeah.
Where is his other foot if he was standing there? But
I think that there are two indentations, aren't there? If we look.
No, there was
only one.
Only one. So,
but you're not referring to the same. I think I have a picture in my presentation of this.
Perhaps I was thinking of the Maqam Ibrahim.
Maqam Ibrahim, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there are two. I think there are two indentations, two oval.
Somebody made this second one. No.
It's probably. I mean, I've seen it. There isn't any.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like that.
That's a lie. That's a lie. You have a dent and not a foot spot. That is garbage lie.
No. This is completely different.
This is AI foot, the foot of Abraham, but not the real thing.
It might be not AI, but it wasn't like that.
See the cover.
But I have some difficulty with the miracle anyway. Let us suppose that Abraham has been told to build a house, and he wants to do the upper part of the building and the upper part of the wall, and he needs to stand on something to put the blocks up on the wall because he's building the house.
Yeah.
Let's suppose this, and it's a fairly useless item because it's only 1 foot tall. Well, you stand on that. That's not going to help you to build a house. It's not like a step ladder or something that will give you like several feet. It'll give you 1 foot at most. But then suppose he drags this heavy stone rectangle over so that he can step on it to put a layer of
another layer
on the building, and then Allah very helpfully makes him sink 6 inches into the 12 inches that he's moved over. It's not very helpful, is it? It's
right.
I don't see the miracle. I don't see the story. You're absolutely right, Yusuf. The story seems to trail off, as though no one could quite explain what it's meant to signify or why it's happened. It's an attempt to explain an artifact.
Sure. Listen to how his father answered. Listen to how.
So yes. instead of giving me an answer, a child is asking a question, instead of giving me an answer, and because I asked it out loud, I got a smack in the head. Like, you cannot doubt these things. You know, we were taught, and that's what we take.
Never to ask. Quran 5:101 is a very powerful verse. Never to ask. Don't ask. End the story.
Right.
So go
Okay,
ahead.
great.
I'm sorry to interrupt your teaching about the Kaaba, but you could not figure out a ways archaeologically or scientifically if any proof of anything about Islam. We just take it for what it is because we have been told, and it's the end of the story.
Well, we have I have an explanation, same as Paul, for the footprints. It's pure concordism. There is a mention in the Quranic text of clear signs of the standing place of Abraham. And so because there is a mention in the Quranic text, devout Muslims think this must be. And so they created it. They created it. But actually, literally, the expression ayatun bayinatun can be understood as clear sign, or it can also be understood as clear verses. And if you look in the Bible, for example, you will see clear verses about Abraham's standing place, which, according to the biblical tradition and the Jewish tradition, is supposed to be on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. It's one strong argument for the Jerusalem thesis.
Yeah.
On the Maqam Ibrahim, I don't want to distract you too much, Odin, but I had a thought as an artifact. Is it possible it might be a foot washing basin? Is it the sort of item that one might possibly have used to wash one's feet before, either before entering a place of worship, or possibly used by Christians commemorating Maundy Thursday? I just wonder that as a possibility.
It seems very small. One would need a basin or something bigger than the footprints.
You think
these footprints?
Maybe in Abraham days, the feet of the prophets were too small, maybe like a small tiny baby foot, and that would be good enough to put water.
Young boys were bigger, but men were much smaller with tiny feet. But you know what they say? Tiny feet, you know.
No, okay.
With that thing, I think the casket that is around the so-called footprints, it has some Arabic written on it, and if I remember correctly, it has diacritics. So that thing, at least the mold, was done most likely in the 9th century or later. Most likely much later.
Whoa. That's new information. Did you see any Arabic written on it?
I think even the picture that you guys showed, I promise you it was not like that one. This was too clean. What I saw was just a rock with one dent in it, and it's split by.
It's not a perfect footprint. No,
it's been updated since then. In other words, right? Yeah. So Odon, back to you.
Okay. Let's go on. So, well, we were talking about Mecca in Islam, and it's a foundational piece in the Islamic narrative because it is the background of the Islamic revelation. Muhammad is supposed to have lived there. He was born in Mecca. It is the place where he received the revelation, along with Medina, and it is also the objective of his mission. One of his objectives of his mission as a political and a religious ruler. He has to, according to the narrative, he has to reconquer the city from which he was expelled. He has to reconquer it from its pagan, polytheistic authorities in order to restore Islam, to restore God's true religion there, purify the Kaaba, which is the old pagan temple that was there, and established the Islamic pilgrimage, the Hajj. So in a way, Islamic Mecca understood within the Islamic narrative is part of Muhammad's legacy, and it's the foundation for Islam. So engaging Mecca is equivalent to engage and address and directly attack the Islamic narrative and therefore Islam itself. Let's now have a look at the Muslim claims on Mecca based on what the Quran says. This part I forgot. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it goes without saying. Nowadays, Mecca is so essential within Islam. It's a sort of beating heart because it is the center for the pilgrimage, which is one of Islam's 5 individual pillars. Every Muslim, if he has the means to do so, he has to perform at least once in his life the ritual pilgrimage, the Hajj in Mecca, and it draws millions of pilgrimage each year nowadays. And so the rulers of Mecca wield considerable influence over the Islam and Muslim because of the Hajj. So not only is it essential to Islam, it's also essential to geopolitics, to the play between the great powers and so on. So it's more than religion. It's politics, geopolitics. It's very important. And now, as I said, let's have a look at the claims Muslims have on Mecca, according to how they understand the Quran. They read the Quran, and within the Quran, they have there are many verses that they interpret as referring to Mecca, and it says it is the basis for their narrative. Their interpretation has made Mecca the city that it is today. First of all, they claim that the city, or at least its sanctuary, was there since the beginning of times. It is the most ancient city in the world because it has the most ancient sanctuary. The sanctuary is supposed to have been built by Adam only because of the verse 127 in Surah 2, which is a verse about the building of the Kaaba by Ibrahim. And it is said in his verse that he raised the foundations of the house, which means that there was something before. And the traditionists, the Muslim scholars, they invented or interpreted this verse. They invented and interpreted this verse by positing that there were foundation, so there must have been an earlier construction, and this earlier construction must have been built by the first man. But outside of the Quran, there is nothing to justify this. That's first of all an interesting belief, interesting thing. They believe that the Kaaba is the most ancient of all sanctuaries, only because of supposition, hypothesis about the word foundation, or the expression foundation of the house, foundation of the temple.
I mean, but the Islamic narrative contradicts itself in that why did Hagar not find anything there? Why did Abraham, when they got there was nothing there, just a tree and some dates? And then also either Adam is supposed to have built it, or Abraham built it, or Abraham rebuilt it, or and Adam was 90 feet tall, so why did he build the Zoolander school for ants?
Yeah, one could argue that the foundation, the building was destroyed because of the cost of times, and the foundation remained, but they were buried. What Abraham did was rediscovering these foundations.
Yeah, well, we can always say that the building was destroyed by the flood, but we know that Abraham came after the flood, and he and his son Ishmael were raising the foundation according to the word of Allah to that building. When you raise the foundation, that means you did not have it to start with.
Right.
So it sounds to me like a brand new building.
Are you guys aware? Sorry, go please.
New building. Right. But Usama, I think you know this better than me. In Arabic, I think it's about raising the house from its foundation.
No, actually, raising the foundation itself.
Not raising the foundation itself. Okay.
And it's amazing the order Muhammad put it in the Quran is weird, because he started by cleaning the house, and then a little bit later he raising the foundation of the house. You're supposed to build the house first, and then you clean it up if there was some uncleanness in it or whatever reason. But it's the whole story. It's like, it seemed to me whoever wrote the passage in the Quran did not realize that he's put it in the wrong order. Does not make any sense whatsoever. Raising the foundation. That means you don't have a house. But before that, I'm sorry, Brother Lloyd. Go ahead.
No, we've spoken about this.
Yeah, excuse me, Lloyd.
No, please finish. No.
Would it be helpful if I make an observation here? I know I tend to be a bit boring on this and try and bring everything back to Jerusalem, as though that's the only thing I've got to say. But if one thinks of the house as being the Jerusalem temple, the foundation stone of the temple is the pinnacle, the summit of Mount Moriah. So in order to build a temple upon a fairly small exposed piece of rock, one has to build up foundations around it. And of course, you look at the Temple Mount now, and it's very clear that there's a level esplanade, and then at the moment the Dome of the Rock. But once upon a time, the temple was built on a raised platform like that. So for Jerusalem, the idea of raising the foundations, to me, makes perfect sense, because it's built on the top of a hill. I don't see any way in which you would raise foundations for Mecca, which is in a valley, and the actual area around the Kaaba seems pretty flat. There's no you would normally dig foundations. For most buildings, it's quite unusual that you build a building on the top of a hill that you have to raise up the land around it. So the phrase raising the foundations, I would argue, works quite well for Jerusalem, not so well for the Kaaba.
That's why you're here, Paul. And that makes good sense to me. That actually does make good sense. I wanted to add that there's more than one side to this. I know a few years ago when I started talking about some of these things, it was regarded as a little bit oddball and off the wall, but now it's starting to become, shall we say, more accepted and discussed. But about 70 years ago, I'm referring now to 82, but a lot of the research goes back to the 50s. But the Kaaba is one of potentially thousands of, there were dozens, or at least there were several Kaabas in the past that have all disappeared or been destroyed, right? But also there are thousands of ancient archaeological ruins all across Arabia that are now being acknowledged, discovered, photographed, and so on. But the Kaaba was considered, even like 70, 80 years ago, to be a megalith, roughly like Stonehenge, in that same category. It was aligned to astrological, it had astrological alignment to the phases of the moon, to the alignment with the sun at a certain time, like the equinox, and the moon at a certain month, and the winds and the stars, and it's aligned to various famous stars like Canopus. So the Kaaba seems to potentially have had a pagan temple, and then at some point it maybe became an Ethiopian Christian temple, and then eventually, so, but it does seem, but it's got all of the hallmarks, all of the signs, all of the marks of having been some kind of also astrological clock, if you will, or some kind of, but a megalith as well. There's a lot of evidence we can discuss in the future.
Yeah. Well,
May I ask just one thing? There was one verse, I don't think it was in the previous slide, but I think it's relevant, that is interpreted as being about Mecca, that says something like, and God established Abram in a desolated area or something like that. Now, if we look at the Bible, there is this section where Abram is talking with Lot, and he says to Lot, you pick one side and I will go to the other one. You go right, I go left, you go left, I go right. And Lot looks to the right and he sees the land of Sodom and that region in Jordan. And the Bible describes that region as well watered. So then Lot decides to go in that direction. And Abram, of course, goes in the other direction. So that verse in the Quran that is interpreted as, you see, desolated area, that is Mecca.
Yes.
To me, it
Exactly.
sounds like they are giving the alternative reading of the Bible, where one side is well watered, so the other one would be desolate,
Have
and
been
that's actually
normal.
where Abram goes.
And by the way, that show you this is true historically, because if it was not for the rain, the Jewish people, the descendants of Jacob, and those who came back with Moses could not live there. You're not talking about some rivers and what do you call this, springs? No. None of that is in the. It's a desert, and they depend completely on God. I was wondering if Odin, did you look at the interpretation of Quran chapter 2 and verse 140? I'm sorry, 127, where Al-Tabari told us that the original house was actually built by Adam, and he said that they actually built it in 5 different locations, in 5 different mountains. And I will name you the mountains. He said Mount Jarrah, which is obviously that is in Saudi Arabia. Mount Jarrah, you don't know. Mount Zaytan, I don't know who is that, and Mount Sinai, that is, and then Mount in Lebanon, and Mount Al-Judi, which is in Iraq. That does not make any sense. How can Adam build the first house in 5 different mountains in 5 different locations of the world? Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever looked at that interpretation?
I didn't know about it, but the thing about the Sinai is very interesting, because Sinai in the Jewish tradition is a sanctuary. This is where Moses met God. So God was there. So it is a sanctuary.
Which is in Arabia, near the land of Midian. Exactly.
And it's all the more interesting that there is a Jewish tradition about Moses' night journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai, where he enters the sanctuary with God, and God shows him the celestial Torah, which is a very close to the Islamic narrative of Muhammad's night journey, based on the on one verse. But it's an argument for later, and it goes with the Jerusalem thesis.
I just want to bring this up very quickly, because look, they went to a place that was very pagan in the past. They wanted to recreate the Jerusalem narrative in a place that had an existing set of stories and culture, and they needed to somehow merge the two, make a sandwich out of it, right? Just mentioned, this is Jean-Léon Gérôme, French, it seems, and it talks here, and this one is in the Sciences, May, June 1982. The Kaaba might even have features in common with the Great Stone Circle on Salisbury Plain, right? And they speak of, it's aligned with the sun, the moon, Venus, and Canopus, and the walls were built up in alternate layers of stone and wood, like the churches of Ethiopia. It's aligned towards the southernmost setting position of the moon at the winter solstice. The major axis of Kaaba is aligned to the rising of Canopus, And then it goes on to speak of the faces of the Kaaba. It's a primitive observatory, a weather vane, and appointed to God. So it's a microcosm of celestial and terrestrial universe of the pagan Arabs. I mean, so not to get too stuck into this, but just there's certain streams of research which have been forgotten.
Just a remark. Jean-Léon Gérôme is the painter of the picture. He's not the scholar who wrote the article.
Ah, sorry, my bad. Okay. Yeah, in this case, the scholar is David King, Associate Professor of Arabic and History at New York University. He's written 50 papers on the history of astronomy and mathematics in medieval Islam, and he wrote a book, The World About the Kaaba, a study of the sacred directions in medieval Islam.
Yeah. Okay. He's also a strong opponent to Dan Gibson's thesis, and he's financed by some Muslim or Islamic foundations.
Yeah, but this was in the 80s. Remember, this is like what, 44 years ago that he wrote this. Maybe this was before the guy was getting all that good Qatari money, right?
Yes, when Dan Gibson produced, I thought very, very fine work, and I disagree with his Dan Gibson's end point, but I do incorporate. He makes several very good points along the way, and I do think that Dan Gibson has made a great contribution to this debate. And the way that David King laid into him was not academic and was not professional. He was clearly motivated by a challenge to himself, and I think that rather diminishes him in my eyes.
No, but the worst point that David King made in his grudge is that he acknowledged that most ancient, most early mosques, or at least some of them, are very precisely directed towards Petra. But his explanation is that it's only a coincidence, which cannot be. It cannot be precise. It cannot be this way if it's a coincidence. But in his paper against Gibson, he wrote it nonetheless. He didn't realize what he was doing, I think. Anyhow, let's go back to the descriptions of Mecca, supposedly in the Quran. One other very important description is that Mecca is supposed to be the standing place of Abraham, Maqam Ibrahim. And this expression is used several times in the Quran, and within the Islamic narrative, it can only be, of course, Mecca, because it is the place where he was put to the test by God, who asked him to sacrifice his son. The son is not named in the Quran, but the Islamic narrative assumes it's Ishmael and not Isaac. And so we have this very famous passage about the near sacrifice of Abraham's son, which is a sort of copy of what we find in the Bible. And it gives us also an explanation, a way to understand the meaning of Maqam. It's not just a standing place. Of course, it's based on the word, the verb, which means to stand. But it's not only to stand; it's to stand as if in a trial. It's to stand before God. It's to stand to pass God's test. And we have the exact same expression in Hebrew, Makom, Abraham. And so it's not just a place, it's and not just a standing place, it's a testing place.
But brother, it's more than that. We have too many problems with that passage, If we took the passage literally, he was walking with his father, talking with his father. This could not be Ishmael. According to the Islamic teaching of the Hadith, Abraham was already left his son Ishmael with his mother while he's still breastfeeding. So obviously that story, and by the way, when you hear Muslims, we know for sure it was Ishmael, not Isaac. That's a garbage lie, because you go to Al-Tabari, you go to Ibn Kathir, you go to all of them, they say it could be Ishmael, it could be Isaac. But as a matter of fact, there's more evidence of it to be Isaac more than Ishmael. Because if it was Ishmael, Ishmael was left away in this faraway land in Mecca while he was still breastfeeding of his mama, 2 years or younger, which means he could not be walking with his father, talking with his father. Abraham never saw Ishmael in the ridiculous narratives which is given to us by so-called Muslim scholars until he was married to his first wife, an Arab lady, and then he went one more time when he married to the second Arab wife. And in both incidents, he never actually met with his son Ishmael, which does not make any sense. So obviously, Quran 37:101, the story is there. Actually, it's about Isaac, not Ishmael, according not only to the interpretation of scholars, which they wishy-washy, they will not take a stand, but according to the logic of the rest of the story.
Yeah, and I've just quoted this passage up to verse 106, but if you look afterwards, I think verse 107 or 108, it's all about Isaac there, and not about Ishmael. But the thing is,
brother, it starts from the first verse. When he was asking Allah for a forbearing young man, Ishmael was never described in the Bible to be a forbearing young man. He's a wild man. His hand is against everybody, and everybody's against him. So from the beginning to the end, that is a story about Isaac, not Ishmael.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting point because this story is understandable by Muslims. You see, most Muslims, almost all Muslims, they don't dare question the Islamic narrative. When the Islamic narrative says it's Ishmael, not Isaac, they don't question it. They're not supposed to. But this is so obvious that it is Ishmael, that it is Isaac who is the forbearing young man, the boy, and not Ishmael, that I have seen a French Muslim apologist state that it was not about Ishmael but Isaac. But because of this, the whole of the Muslim community fell upon him and said he was an apostate because he dared question the Islamic narrative. And that's the thing about Islam. Islam is not about the Quran, actually. It's about the tradition, the Sharia law, and the interpretation of the Quran and the tradition by Muslim scholars. So actually most Muslims haven't read the Quran. They know only bits of it for the prayer, but they don't read the Quran and they don't understand it. So the point here about Ishmael and Isaac is very interesting. It helps us understand how the actual role of the Quran within Islam. It's supposed to be the revelation, but Islam is not about the Quran. It's about something else. It's about Sharia law, for example, but not the Quran. So
one point I think before we leave the Makam Ibrahim is the word, the Hebrew word makom appears. It's quite an ordinary word. It's a common word in ordinary usage, but it occurs with particular prominence in chapter 22 of Genesis, which is the passage where Abraham takes Isaac up onto Mount Moriah to willing to sacrifice him. And the word makom appears 4 times within that chapter, and twice within the phrase the makom that has been pointed out to him, in the place has been pointed out to Abraham. And this is quite important for Judaism, because Abraham built 4 altars to God, but this is the one place where God had singled out and led Abraham to and said, you must do it there. So it's a place that had been pointed out, the Mecca that had been pointed out to Abraham. And then, of course, many generations later, David is also led to that place and told this is where you must build the temple. So the word Mecca, although it's a relatively ordinary, commonplace word, does have particular resonance. Anyone who was familiar with chapter 22 of Genesis couldn't help but notice that this word, the Mecca Ibrahim, would be an allusion to the way it's presented in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting remark because it echoes with the story of Adam building the Kaaba that we talked about, and this Kaaba being forgotten, and God, seeing that it has been forgotten, sent the Islamic Abraham to the very same place to rebuild it. Just like David was sent there by God, was sent to Mount Moriah by God to rebuild Abraham's altar, Abraham's original temple or sanctuary. It's the same pattern.
Don't forget also,
yeah.
Don't forget, guys, the altar which the Lord have required his people to build, it was never a building like that which we see in the Kaaba, because what they do is they stack a bunch of rocks without corners, without smoothing with any chisel or any hammer. They just build a pile of rocks, natural shape, no square, no building. The Kaaba is one thing, and the altar which we read about throughout the Old Testament is a completely different story.
Yeah. But the Islamic narrative story about the Kaaba is derived from Jewish tradition.
Yeah,
They applied the same pattern. The Kaaba has this cubic form because it is the form of the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem Second Temple.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a strong connection between Judaism, Jewish traditions, and the fabrication of Islam. The other very, very strong expression that connects, that supposedly, according to the Islamic narrative, connects Mecca to the Quran is the many mention within the Quran of the Kaaba, and supposedly it has been built or rebuilt by Abraham and Ishmael. So it's we talked already about this episode. So it's mentioned several times that Abraham built or rebuilt the Kaaba. We already looked at this verse in Surah 2, 127. There are other mentions of Abraham and his connection with the holy city and the Kaaba. Surah 22, verse 26. And I want everything that is within brackets is, of course, a glose, a text that has been added by the Muslim scholars in order to interpret it as the Islamic narrative imposes. So, and when we designated Abraham for the site of the house, the temple, for the Kaaba, according to this narrative, do not associate anything with me, purify my house for those who perform tawaf. So here it's not translated. By the way, this is the Sahi International Translation. So it's a translation that is very obedient to the Islamic narrative. So those who
When
perform tawaf.
Christians use it, it becomes Daif International, Odon.
Excuse me?
When Christians use it, it becomes Daif International.
Daif. Ah,
Yeah, it means weak international.
Yeah,
we-
it's no longer Sahih when we use it.
But you'll see it afterwards. For my part, and you will see also this in my book. Mostly, I used Arthur Droge or Droge translation, which is much more true to the Quranic text. Most translation, as we know now, have been done by Muslims, and they twist the true meaning of the Arabic words and expression in order to fit the Islamic narrative. An interesting point here is that this we see here this idea of the tawaf, so the circumambulation around the temple, and it is also a Jewish custom. And the last word is Abraham saying, "My Lord, make this city," supposedly Mecca, according to the narrative, secure. Keep me, my son, away from worshipping idols. And in this Islamic narrative, in the Islamic reading of the Quran, is also very centered on God's place of worship being in Mecca. So the sanctuary, there is a mention of a temple, which is translated here as a house. And we see that this temple is located in the same place as the standing place of Abraham. And so by association, we understand why the Islamic narrative pretends that everything is in Mecca. In Mecca, we find the Kaaba. It has been built by Abraham. It's his standing place. It's the temple. It's God's place of worship. It's a city. It's the first temple that has been built, so it goes back to the idea that Adam was the it was
Are you
built by-
sure it was the first temple, brother? Are you sure it was the first temple? Because I thought Adam was the first.
No, what I'm saying is that it's like the Russian puppets that goes one. You open one, and everything fits together.
Sure. Sure.
There are many descriptions in the Quran of a place with a sanctuary, a temple. Supposedly the temple has been originally it has been built by Adam, then rebuilt by Abraham, and it all goes together. But nowhere in the text is said that it is actually in Mecca. There is one verse that we see afterwards with the mention Mecca, but it can be understood as not referring to Mecca, but as meaning something else. And so we have a sort of scaffolding here within the Islamic narrative. Nothing says it refers to Mecca, but it always refers to the same place.
Yeah. But I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Maybe everybody can share about it. Who put the idols which exist in Muhammad days inside the Kaaba? The 365 idols. Who put them in the Kaaba? Was it Allah, which He is very well known to be the one who leads people astray, or leads whom He will, and He guides whom He will? Or was it the Arab against the will of Allah? I mean, we have more problem with the Kaaba of Muhammad than to put it anywhere else you want to put it there. So we know that it is Allah who's in charge, and it is Allah who literally causes people to be led astray. And what a great way to lead people astray, to send them to hell, to make them partner other gods with Allah, which is the sin of shirk. Brother Yusuf, correct me, it is the unforgiven sin. So if Allah is the one who leads people astray and causes them to worship all these 360 some gods, but in the Kaaba, his place of worship, the most holy site for Allah, or it was done by the devil and the people against the will of Allah.
Well, I mean,
Who's in
Abraham,
charge?
And of course, this is the same Allah who smote Abraham with all his elephants when they came up to destroy the Kaaba, bringing their elephant all the way up from Yemen to pull down the Kaaba with its trunk. Then God, Allah, stirs himself to perform the miracle of the birds smiting the army with the tiny pebbles, killing everybody who the pebbles strike. But you're absolutely right. Why did he not do something similar? And what meaning, since that took place before the call of Muhammad and the cleansing of Mecca, why did God do that? Why did Allah do that then, and then call Muhammad to cleanse it? Why didn't God see through the whole thing at that time? Or why was God protecting a pagan shrine? So the story doesn't tie up.
If Abraham had founded it and it was Allah's shrine, then at what point did Allah get all these other companion gods clustered there with him? But if you go back in history, you look at what the Arabians were doing when they were trading all the way up into Turkey, Syria, right? They had, I think, something like 12 trade cities that they'd established, which so like Hatra is one of them that was discovered in the late 1800s or something. They discovered Hatra, where the Arabs had set up a trade post, and these trade posts were agnostic. So within their temple, they would have all of the gods of all of the people who traveled through the city to trade, so that anyone could go to that temple and worship. And they would have dozens, if not hundreds, of gods in the temple. So you've already got a model that was current at the time. I mean, at the pagan era, well, long before Islam, where they were doing this. So you had a model for having a Muslim temple with hundreds of gods in it. So that already existed in the past.
All right. So I have one more question to Odin. How about the other Kaabas which exist all over the earth near the Saudi Arabia Kaaba? What have you done any research about it, and tell me what Muslims think about these other Kaabas?
Actually, within the Islamic narrative and for Muslim, there is supposed to be only one Kaaba, and it
But remember, they went to Yemen to destroy. He sent 150 men to destroy the Kaaba in Yemen.
The thing is that the Kaaba is not how do you say this, a proper noun. It's a common name for a sanctuary. And so we have Kaabas outside of Arabia also. We have Zoroaster's Kaaba in Iran, for example. There is the Kaaba in Jerusalem, which is the tomb of Mary, and it was a Kaaba, because a Kaaba, I think originally it meant a cube, a cubic form sanctuary. But
that
it
is the
became
meaning.
A generic name.
Yeah.
It became a generic name, the same as some brands like a Kleenex, for example. Give me a Kleenex. It has become a common name. And Kaaba, actually, in the 7th century, it was a common name. Of course, there was the reference to the cubic form of the Holy of Holy in Jerusalem, Second Temple.
Yeah. Something. Sorry, go finish on, please.
No, I'm done. Go on.
Just something I want to mention, because there were temples dedicated to Mecca, al-Mecca. I mean, but this is like slightly off topic, slightly on topic. This is Yemen, right? And they had a specific size of temple, 14 by 18 by 14. Right?
We talked about it.
Yeah, and Mecca, but they would always have these pillars, 6 to 8 pillars, right? You can see here's another temple, and you can see all these pillars. And Islam leans heavily on the pillars of Islam, and this is what preceded it, was temples with pillars. So it's just that there seems to be these potential references to the previous culture to tie it to the culture they were
Egyptian.
embedding in.
Brother,
That-
we have many pillars in Egypt. Pillars in Egypt, it's all over Egypt, and many of them you see them fall broken, but there are many standing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're trying to retain the culture that they embedded themselves in, the South Arabian culture, but they're also trying to push a new narrative, and then trying to merge all of these things. So you have all these disconnects.
Mm-hmm.
I have another returning to the Abraham building the Kaaba, which is a question or observation or rhetorical question, which is what was the purpose of the Kaaba as a structure when if Abraham built it, it looks like a single chamber room. There's a little staircase, but let's treat it as a chamber. It looks as though it's meant to hold something. Now, Abraham didn't build it to house all these idols. So what did he build it to have inside, or what did he expect might happen inside? And the Islamic narrative is completely silent on this, on what the building was ever there for. All the interactions with the Kaaba are from outside it. You're supposed to circle it, you're supposed to pray towards it, but it could be anything. There's no reason why it should be a building that one is capable of walking inside. It might as well be an altar or something. What was it there for? It's empty now, but with again, to Jerusalem, we know what it's there for. It's there to house the Ark of the Covenant, which was then resting at the time of the first temple, was resting on the very spot where the covenant had been sealed by Abraham's show of fidelity at the binding of Isaac. So we know exactly what the temple was there to hold. And even after the Babylonians took the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God was still believed to reside within the Holy of Holies. But I've never heard any Muslim say that Allah is specifically present in the Kaaba. I've never heard anyone claim that the Ark of the Covenant made its way all the way down to Mecca. And what was it for? All these loose questions that I've never heard a plausible answer for. Did any of you guys have come across that?
Even if we take it back to Adam, if Adam built the first Kaaba, as Muslims claim, I'll ask the same question you're presenting to us here. What was the purpose of Adam to build the first building? And it will be too small for Adam to even go inside it. I mean, think about Adam, who's at 90 foot long, so it's 60 cubit, 90 foot long, and the building was too small. So what was the purpose for Adam or for Abraham to build the same building? What are we getting out of it?
Allah says, go build a house for me, right?
Yeah.
On this point, there are three pillars inside the current Kaaba. Again, we go back to pillars, and if you go back to the Old Testament, I have it in my notes, I'm not going to look it up now. Abraham is forbidden to worship stone pillars as well as tree pillars, effectively, as gods. And then if you look at the door of the Kaaba, it's got huge symbolism. It's gold covered, but it's got the sun and the moon. So there's that symbolism. So there's, again, you've got these Jerusalem type themes, and you've got these ancient pagan themes, and it's trying to reconcile these to make everybody happy.
But the Kaaba we see now is, of course, it's not Muhammad's Kaaba.
Yeah, correct.
But the Kaaba was destroyed by a flood around 1630 or 1631, completely destroyed, and it was rebuilt from the foundation, but from the rock, from the bedrock. So what we have today has nothing in common with the Kaaba from the Middle Ages. But there's a point I want to make based on Paul's remark. It's very interesting, this absence of meaning. The Kaaba doesn't mean anything for Adam. It doesn't mean anything for Abraham. the building has no sense at all. And I think it's a clue that this story, the Islamic narrative story, does not come from an actual religious tradition. It's a clue that it's a forgery, a copy of another story, which is the Jewish tradition story. In the Jewish tradition, Adam goes to Jerusalem, and still I think there is a chapel nowadays dedicated to Adam near the Holy Sepulchre. And thereafter, Abraham goes there and builds an altar, and David goes there and sets up the tent, and his son Solomon builds the temple. And what we have in the Islamic narrative is it's only the copy, the twisted copy of this Jewish pattern.
Yeah.
Yes, on that, if I may. So I think you're probably right. Odon, it sounds about right. And of course, then the Kaaba is nothing but an icon that represents the original temple. It does look like maybe when they built it, unless it is from Persian influence or a different influence, if it is Jewish, then the purpose would have been to hold the presence of God, which of course, then when the narrative is starting to develop, they say that God cannot enter creation, and then you have this building that initially they built it as well. This building will hold the presence of God, but now you cannot say that anymore. So now you have an empty building and nothing else.
No.
Yeah,
and,
in the myth, Jews says the hand of God on the earth, and if you kiss the black stone, you can be forgiven, or if you touch the Yemeni corner, you can be forgiven. So it has holy properties or godly properties.
But I have a question for you, Lloyd, because it bothers me so much. Where do you come up with all these pictures inside the Kaaba and the 3 pillars? And nobody have seen what's inside the Kaaba. Is this like a comedy, or are you serious about these pictures you've shown us?
I Googled it. Google can never be wrong.
Trust me, brother. And I doubt any of this is true. I doubt it. Because
so I think it's a lot of it is taken from the Jewish traditions. I don't know the history behind it, but in Saudi Arabia, at least up to 20 years ago, the king of Saudi Arabia can go, and they call him, he takes care of the Kaaba. They call him the servant. Every king in Saudi is called the servant of the house of Allah. The two houses of Allah. Sorry, not Khadim al-Haramain.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So the servant of the 2 houses of Allah, the one in Mecca and the one in Medina. Every year, when it comes to the Kaaba, he will replace the outside cloth, the black cloth that goes on
with the new one,
and for him to be, it's more like a blessing for him, I guess. They allow him to go in. What to do? I don't know what they're doing it. What's inside it? I don't know what's inside it. No one knows.
But when you look at these pictures, they look like wow.
Right.
They allow camera.
But that reminds me of the high priest going into
the
Holy of Holies once a year.
Once a year.
It's kind of like.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kaaba, all its glory. Doesn't this inspire you to visit this glorious brick building?
Lloyd, if you can pause on that picture for a moment, there is something rather strange about it. There seems to be a second door that's been bricked up, and I've never heard of any explanation as to where this is. And again, one wonders why one would have built a door. If the building had dated back to Muhammad's time, or Muhammad had taken it over, the door might have already been there and then he picked it up. If it's been built since then, I just ask the question: why would anyone have built a door in it?
Also,
it's a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah. Also, you can add to that, brother. The size of the Kaaba is getting bigger and bigger as years go by. It was not that large size building, and they just, I don't know, remodeling, come up with update, make it bigger, even though it was supposed to be Adam's building. If this was the first one built by Adam was, I don't know what's wrong with him.
Cinder blocks.
I would build,
We didn't get
listen,
the
if
cinder
I
blocks.
had them, I would build the pyramids of.
I think that might actually come from very early on, Lloyd, when people didn't know how to enter the houses in Islam. So
The Quran does
There
say,
you go.
yes, into the house by the right door. You know, into the house the right way. What was it, please, JC? Just tell us.
Into
yeah,
the land,
something along those lines.
into the door.
Into
Talk about the promised land from the door. That does not make Quran chapter 5
Yeah,
verse.
into your house by the right door. Don't enter through
Yeah.
the window or Allah told us, enter your house by the door. This is advice from Allah. Go in by the door.
Mashallah. You don't go from the window? Can I go from the windows?
Don't climb up the drain pipe onto the balcony, sneak in the back. No, that's just Allah needed to
Solid
tell us
advice.
to use the door.
You know, I have a favorite song. It's like it was sung to me by some real redneck people here in Tennessee, and the brother told me last night I lay my head on my pillars. Last night I stuck my feet out of the windows, and now all my people are dead. So talk about windows and bed. I got the song for you. Anyway.
There's something else to be said about this second door in the actual Kaaba, nowadays Kaaba. For sure, at the time when this was built, this Kaaba was built. The model of this Kaaba dates from the 17th century, as I said. There was a flood, and the former Kaaba was destroyed, and it was rebuilt with two doors, obviously. And at the time, they felt the need to how do you say to fill in the one of the two doors. And what's really interesting is that nowadays every Muslim depiction of the supposedly original Kaaba from Muhammad's time, and we will see an image in a bit, is based on what the Kaaba is today. It has only one door, for example. If you look at the movie The Message, there is a depiction of ancient Mecca, fantasy Mecca from the time of the Prophet. And the Kaaba that is depicted there is exactly like the one we have today, with only one door. Now, it's interesting how history is being reshaped and rewritten day to day, actually, by the new high priest, who is the king, the Saudi king.
Actually, maybe that's something that we could discuss at one point, because Jay Smith mentioned the whole thing about throwing the stones to the pillar of Satan, and that recently that has changed to 3, and they have the stories. So if we have these stories with the Kaaba as well, and our new friend has mentioned that even the foot of Ibrahim that he saw, they are different, is making me think that maybe the ones that we see now online is not the same that we had 30 years ago. So maybe we need to do a little bit of digging and show how they are reshaping the history in the last decades.
Yeah, in 100 years, there's always going to have been 3 pillars to throw the stones at, if you think about it.
Yeah.
The next remodeling, we're going to add one more thing, next remodeling, inshallah.
Yeah, they're going to have a disco ball inside the Kaaba. No, it's always been there.
It has always had Wi-Fi inside it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminds me of...
Wi-Fi is too expensive. That's why they don't have Wi-Fi. It's too expensive.
I was about to say that it reminds me of a video that David Wood did in his glorious times, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago, maybe more, where thanks to the magic of special effects, he put himself inside the Kaaba.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah,
it was something to be seen. Anyhow, let's conclude this this slide about the pre-Muhammad Islamic narrative with this remark: God's religion fell into oblivion, and Mecca became the holy city of Arabian polytheism. And you see this; it is exactly the what I was telling you about. We see this pattern of someone building the first sanctuary, then it falls into oblivion, and then another one comes to the same place, he rebuilds it, and it falls again into oblivion. And I think it relates to the Jewish tradition. The Jewish tradition tells us about Adam going to Jerusalem, thereafter Abraham, thereafter David, Solomon, and so on. But the Jewish tradition has an explanation as to why Abraham had to go there or David had to go there. But there is no explanation within the Islamic narrative as to why God's religion fell into oblivion after Adam. And again, it fell into oblivion after Abraham. Why wasn't it kept? Actually, and I haven't found any answer within the Islamic narrative. The only answer I can fathom is that the Islamic narrative was copied from this Jewish pattern, but without the explanation, because they could not copy everything.
Yeah, brother, notice the difference between the tabernacle tent or Solomon temple later. Obviously, we know David could not build the temple because he had bloody hand, and the Lord chose his son Solomon, which means peace, as his name is, actually means to build the temple. As a fact, in the Holy of Holiness, there was the Ark of the Covenant. Even when it used to be outside, as you travel, you could not touch it by your hand. That is how holy it is. We know one incident when the Ark of the Covenant seemed to be, was carried on a cart with 2 cows, and it was about to lean, it's about to fall, and a man with sincere heart reached out to put his hand on it to stop it from falling. And the Lord said that he struck him dead on the spot. In the Holy of Holiness, in the Temple of Solomon, not anybody can go inside anytime. And Muhammad made so many errors in the narratives of the Quran about, Mary, when she was a baby, she used to live there. And by the way, he miraculously, Muhammad put a window. Literally, he put a window in the mihrab. And actually, David also saw the golden bird flying in and out of that window while he was waiting for the test of Allah to make him a great man like Abraham was, or like other people before him. So anyway, and Moses. So windows, there's no windows. That's an error. Zechariah will be able to go up into the Holy of Holies on the ladder from outside to look at Mary, to check on her. That's not true. Nobody can go inside the Holy of Holies except the high priest once a year, and in the specific day, which is the day of Yom Kippur. Yeah, Yom Kippur. So, and even when the high priest go there, he will take the blood of the sacrifice and he dropped 7 drops of blood on the Ark of the Covenant, and it is specific rules have to be done. And when he go there, tradition tells us that he used to have jingles on his robes and a bit on his clothes and a big robe around his waist. Why? If he make any mistake, say drop 8 drops of blood instead of 7, he will be dropped dead, and nobody can go inside. Okay, let me go carry him out. No, you have to pull him out from the rope, which is tied around his waist. These are things we know about the holiness of that place. What holiness do we have in the Kaaba? That in Muhammad days, there were 360 some gods inside it. You could not put one god inside the Holy of Holiness. You could not even walk in with a piece of wood or a piece of rock to add it to the Ark of the Covenant. So, I mean, you can copy whatever you want to copy. You can make a counterfeit to the Jewish beliefs and the Jewish faith and the Jewish practices and Jewish worship, but it does not fit. It's a comedy. It's a comedy. There is no holiness in the Kaaba. As a matter of fact, We know that Muhammad in the last days, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he was given order to kill people even if they hang on the ropes of the Kaaba, the holy place. Kill them. Are you kidding me?
I agree, Usama. It's your way of putting it, a comedy. I try to explain it with this, with what I said. It's all about copying the pattern of another tradition without understanding it. So there is no priest in Islam. There is no meaning in the Kaaba and so on.
Yeah, but they're still going to graft it into the culture that they moved into. They have to graft it into this Southern Arabian culture. It's not, so you've transplanted a tradition into a vacuum where you've got a tabula rasa, you've got a clean slate, but you have to graft it into this culture that already exists. Because if you look at the Yemeni culture, it was at one point one of the 3 or 4 biggest empires on earth. It was highly it was highly sophisticated. It rivaled the Greek and Roman empires for sophistication. There were traders. They had language. There was more writing in Arabia before Muhammad than after Muhammad.
Sure. Don't forget the counterfeit does not work. Why? Because in the Bible, the reason for the existing of the Holy of Holiness and the reason for existence of the sacrifice is very clear. The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. In the Old Testament, they offer sacrifice, and by the blood of the sacrifices, they used to receive covering for their sin, all the way from Adam until Christ. In Christ, we receive forgiveness for our sin. You cannot tell me you can replace that with a counterfeit of kissing a rock. Kissing, the Bible did not say the wages of sin is kissing a rock. And you can kiss it for grandpa or grandma who passed away, and somehow they will receive forgiveness of their sin, one person at a time. This is a comedy. There is no place to kiss. There is no item to kiss. There's no place to visit to receive forgiveness of sin except the cross. Not because we have Jesus on the cross, but because of the Savior who came, died on the cross, and he was buried, and he rose again on the third day. And because of what Jesus did, we can receive forgiveness of sin. Kissing the black stone, hugging the black stone, whatever you do with the black stone will not give you any forgiveness of any sin, period. So it is a counterfeit, and it is ridiculous. Does not make any sense.
All right. Shall we go on with the presentation?
Yeah, let's go on.
I want to pinpoint now the ways that the Islamic narrative tries to interpret the Quran regarding Muhammad, because what we saw about the standing place of Abraham and the temple and so on, it was all about pre-Muhammad Islamic narrative. But the Islamic narrative tries to interpret the Quran also with Muhammad stories about Mecca, and the one of its interpretation is that Mecca is the place that supposedly Muhammad asks his follower to pray towards in its direction. There is this verse, famous verse, 144 in Surah 2. We have certainly seen the turning of your face toward the heaven. We will surely turn you to a Qibla, with which you will be pleased. So turn your face toward Al-Masjid Al-Haram. And this expression, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, this is the first time we are seeing it tonight. It's supposed to be Masjid Al-Haram, so the place of prostration that is sacred. It's supposed to be the same place as the standing place of Abraham, the house, and so on. It's supposed to be the sanctuary in Mecca, the Kaaba. And so the Islamic narrative interprets it as Muhammad being asked by God to ask his follower to change the Qibla, the prayer direction. And by the way, Qibla, we will see it in a bit. Qibla, it can mean direction of prayer, but literally it has to do with the tradition, what was before. So we we can interpret the Qibla as being we give you a new tradition. Mecca is also the city that is supposedly, according to the Islamic narrative, lecture reading of the Quran, it is a city that has to be reconquered by Muhammad and the first Muslims. And there supposedly there are some descriptions within the Quran of this endeavor, of this reconquest, of attempts to reconquer the Mecca.
What do you guys think of Roxy's comment? She says, Christ, the rock who takes away our sins. So Islam had to have a counterfeit rock. Well, if you think in terms of maybe the rock of ages, it makes sense.
Yeah, it can make sense in an apologetical way, but the rock of Islam, the black stone, is not a rock anymore. It never was a rock, actually. I think the black stone, it's something like 8 or 12 shards of the original stone that was shattered. We don't know when exactly, and they have been put together with a resin, a black resin. So it's not a stone, actually. If you look closely into it, you see that it's a sort of sphere of resin, and you have shards of the original stone, supposedly, in it. So it's not even a stone that they are kissing and worshipping. It's resin, black tar.
Yeah, and millions of people go there every year to kiss that so that their sins will be forgiven. This is not a scam.
Yeah.
Yeah, kissing a stone is not paganism. It's not pagan either. Don't get that wrong.
Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to say here, what I wanted to pinpoint, is that there are some description of an attempt to reconquer a city and its temple within the Quran, and it's interpreted as referring to Mecca, especially because of the verse 24 in Surah 48, where there is this expression "Bibatni Mecca," which is the only occurrence of the word Mecca, and it's understood within the Islamic narrative as referring to Mecca, and it gives its name to the city. But we will see that we can understand this expression differently. In the heart of Mecca, Bibatni Mecca, it can also be understood as in the heart of battle, in the heart of anger. But we will discuss this afterwards. What's also interesting is that within this text, within the Quran, we have also mention of the Masjid al-Haram having been reconquered. So the city, Mecca, according to the Islamic narrative, is eventually conquered by Muhammad. And we have, it's not very explicit within the Quran, but yeah, there is this verse in Surah 9, verse 7. How can there be for the polytheists a treaty in the sight of God and with his messenger, except for those with whom you made a treaty at Al-Masjid al-Haram? So supposedly Al-Masjid al-Haram is the Kaaba, it's in Mecca. And we see here that the Islamic narrative takes advantage of the Quran, uses it in order to develop a Muhammad narrative with this prayer direction and with this attempt to take Mecca, and finally his achievement. He finally achieved, he conquered Mecca, and he made a treaty with the polytheist who supposedly ruled Mecca at the time. And and for the Muslim, it is proof of the existence of Mecca, the existence of the prophets, and the sacred history.
I think there's we've rolled on. We covered quite a lot there, actually, Odin. But going back to Surah Al-Fat, that's the 48th surah. It's the only reference to Mecca in the Quran, but there's no indication there that this is the special place, that this is the place he's fighting after, that this is the holy place, the place where Abraham was and built there's none of that. In the surah, what happens is that there seems to have been a confrontation with another party, a party of unbelievers, and these other people who are described as restraining, that's not a word. What is a word? Those who disbelieved and turned you from the sacred mosque and the offerings from reaching their place of sacrifice. So there's a confrontation between the person who authored the Quran, let's call it, the principal author, let's call him Muhammad, and the and some people who are trying to stop him get to where he's trying to get to, the Masjid al-Haram. There's no suggestion there that the Mecca is the Masjid al-Haram, simply that's where he came into conflict with people who were trying to stop him from getting there. It seems to me, on my reading, it's as likely that these people are some distance away, and they are blocking Muhammad's access to where he needs to go. Nothing there to say that this is the Masjid al-Haram.
I agree. All things considered, it's like it's what I tried to say when I mentioned that the Islamic narrative is a sort of scaffolding, a very fragile scaffolding based on dubious interpretations of the Quran. The Quran does not speak about Mecca. This is its only occurrence, but it speaks about a temple, a place of Abraham, and so on, and they are all connected in a sense. You see, this whole passage in Surah 48, it's all about the sacred mosque, the Masjid al-Haram. And we know from other verses that Masjid al-Haram is also the house, and it is also the standing place, and so on and so on. So since everything seems to be connected, Muslims came to think that everything is about Mecca. But there's actually only this occurrence, and it is a very weak connection to the actual site of Mecca, because it is nowhere explained that this city, the standing place of Abraham, is in the Hijaz, near the Red Sea, and so on, at its actual location. So yeah, I fully agree with you. But
by the way, I looked at the interpretation of Al-Tabari to these verses in Al-Fath chapter 48 about the victory which Muhammad received and the spoil which he will receive, and Al-Tabari tell me first it's concerning Khaybar. Khaybar is in Medina, not in Mecca. Then he went a little bit later. Some scholars said that it's actually the Romans and Tabuk. And then he went the last portion. He mentioned Mecca. I'm sorry, if you can make potato out of any verse in the Quran, you can make any kind of meals you want to make out, because that's not how the Bible is written. If you want to interpret the Bible, you have to have a solid information with details. Muhammad never, and I said again, never gave us anything in the Quran about anything in details. You mentioned earlier, brother, in your seminar here, in your teaching, clear verses. There's nothing clear in the Quran. There's not one verse is clear in the Quran. So when you get to these verses, and you try to tell me he meant Mecca, my foot. The scholar do not even know what he meant. The true hermeneutics, biblically, what the scholar said, I'm sorry, what the writer of the book said, what he meant by what he said, how he understood it, how his people in his days understood it, and we can bring it to our culture today and we put it in action. You can do that with any doctrine, with any belief about anything, especially in the New Testament. Old Testament sometimes is written in what do you call not poetry, in a prophecy way. You see the fulfillment in the New Testament, everything become clear. So many of the written in the Old Testament did not make sense because it is prophetic and we do not know what God meant by it. But here we go in the New Testament, we can see it clear. When you come to the Quran, you have no idea what Muhammad's talking about. And even the verse of the prophecy of Muhammad that the Roman would be defeated after they will win, I can read it 8 ways. I can read the same verse. I can say they will lose after they will lose, they will win after they will win, they will lose after they will win, and they will win after they will lose 8 ways. Because how you will read the word غُلِبَتْ and غَلَبَتْ, God help us. Nothing in the Quran is clear. That's why when you go to the scholars, they will never, if this actually what he's talking about Mecca should be number 1 and the only interpretation. No, I give you Khaybar, I give you the Roman, I give you the Faris, and then I give you Mecca and only Allah knows. Excuse me. No such a thing as clear verses in the Quran, and the evidence is scholar disagree and Allah knows best. Scholar disagree and Allah knows best. That is comedy.
It's sort of comedy. It's also a proof that the scholars don't know what they are talking about. They don't know the actual meaning of the text, and they invent stories to explain it. And so it tells us that the story of Muhammad living in Mecca, being expelled, trying to reconquer it, and eventually conquering it. It's a story. It's an invention, and you have many different versions of the same story, with huge differences, and it's proof. It's evidence that it's an invention.
But even then, the story doesn't hold up. It's not even a story that one might say has no evidence behind it, but it's a story that doesn't even make sense within its own universe. So, for example, on this verse, the traditional narrative is that the conflict or the altercation between the confrontation between Muhammad and the Quraysh took place in the valley of Hudaybiyah, not at Mecca itself. They have to come out of the city so that they could block Muhammad's way to go to the Masjid al-Haram. So they wouldn't have called it the Valley of Mecca if it took place at another place called Hudaybiyah. Why didn't the Quran say the Valley of Hudaybiyah? And it doesn't. The story, it looks, to my reading, and I'm not sure. I'd say it's a comedy. Perhaps there's humor to be had there. It's a Schadenfreude, perhaps, but there's. I think that there was a group of people who had the text of the Quran, hadn't a clue what it meant, and were trying as best they could to construct stories, one verse at a time, one surah at a time, people trying to make sense of the little bits. And then 120 years later, Ibn Ishaq is given the task of trying to rationalize it all. And he does the best he can with a very difficult mass of material and tries to make sense of it. And then other people it takes another 100 years or more, 200 years, before Al-Tabari comes out with what you might call the final definitive account. I don't think people are I don't think they're trying to mock people or construct something out of nothing. I think it started off with people trying to explain the Quran, and then somebody else trying to explain the explanation, and then somebody else trying to explain that, and somehow the process has come out with the rather garbled and unsatisfactory narrative that we have at the moment. I'd hesitate to call anybody on the route a liar.
Yeah,
I agree.
totally agree with that as well, that it does look like when it was written, everything made sense for the writers, of course, because otherwise you wouldn't write something that makes no sense. But the guys who have to explain it away is hundreds of years later, and they have.
We lost JC.
Oh, we just lost him. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
too bad.
Just joined us again. Welcome back, JC.
Thank you. So just about Mecca, that if we think about the narrative that we've been told, which is Muhammad receives the revelation over 23 years, and pretty much half of them in Mecca, half of them in Yathrib. It's like, okay, Mecca would have been the price. So you would expect Mecca to be mentioned probably hundreds of times in the Quran, but it only appears once. When we realize that the guy is trying to make sense of the Quran, they didn't know what the Quran said, I think the most logical explanation would be that one place where it says Mecca, well, either an interpolation, and I think it's unlikely because it would be very clear, and it isn't. So I think it's more likely that one instance where it says Mecca is simply a mistranslation. It said something, they couldn't read it, they made up a word, and the city appears later in order to justify the text, as we see with the Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Aqsa, and with lots of other things. I would say the word being misinterpreted, not understood, and becoming Mecca is the most logical explanation when we consider it only appears once in a period of 23 years.
Yeah.
Agree. It's all the more reason to...
If you don't mind, guys, I'll add something quickly here. When you talk about cities in the Bible, even the smallest of the cities we read about in the Bible, a place is called Bethlehem of Ephrata. Micah prophesied about it 500 years before our Lord came in the flesh. I can go today to the same city. We have plenty of evidence of when you go to Bethlehem of Ephrata today, yes, indeed, you're going to the same place which has been mentioned in the Bible for over 2,500 years. Why would you not have anything about Mecca? You have to understand that Mecca came 1,100 years after Bethlehem of Ephrata. If that is a holy city, if this have something to do with Abraham, have something to do with the Kaaba, Adam before Abraham, and then we go all the way to Muhammad 600 years after Christ. Why in the world? We know nothing about that city or that location for another 100-some years after Muhammad, where I can walk in the streets of Bethlehem of Ephrata, and I know for sure that I am there. There is plenty of evidence that that is Bethlehem, the smallest of Judah. Can you imagine that? You should think about Mecca to be the greatest of every city on planet Earth, and you can have evidence of it in history, in the writing of those who love Muhammad and those who hate Muhammad. We know nothing about Mecca until 200 years later after Muhammad.
And we know that Mecca and Medina don't even turn up in the list of the 13 oldest cities in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. They're not.
Yeah. I mean, you've got cities like Taif. I've been to Taif twice in my life, if I recall. It is one of the oldest, most established cities in Saudi Arabia, but there's no mention of Mecca. And it's just down the road from Mecca.
Exactly, Lloyd. You should have at least some Arab scholars, or if there was any, of course there are none there, some Jewish historians, some Roman historians, some Coptic historians. Somebody should let us know something about that city. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, they will speak about, there's Pliny the Younger or something. They will speak of one of these coveted, we've discussed it before. They will speak of the guy who speaks of Makaraba, right? And they say it's Mecca, but we know now Makaraba has been placed. It is in Al-Mahabisha in Yemen, and this is about 730 kilometers south of where Mecca is. And Al-Mahabisha means the place of the Ethiopians.
I mean, let me put it this way. What's more important, a tomb for a wicked king in Egypt or Mecca? What's more important, a tomb for some of the Jewish people who died in the Promised Land, or Mecca? Why we know where tombs are, but we know nothing about Mecca?
Yeah. Also, all of the prophets, if you look at the Bible, all the prophets are Jewish, and then you've got this random Arabian dude.
Well, and Muhammad made a big boo-boo in the Quran, where he assured us that the prophethood belonged to the descendant of Jacob, to the descendant of Israel. We got two powerful verses in the idea that there will ever be a prophet who's not a Jew.
Right. Right. No, this is yeah. I mean, so there's a theological aspect to this, right? With clashes with reality or with the known facts. There's a historical, archaeological issue, and there's other perspectives. There's a narrative perspective. There's a number of areas where this clashes. We've been going for 1 hour 50 minutes. I want to close this off at about 2 hours. Then we can, maybe pick this up again next week, because I mean, this is our first episode to discuss this. And it's actually our base, and hopefully from here we'll be able to just pick up speed and throw more perspectives. But yeah, there's obviously multiple angles we can attack this from, and hopefully we can, over time, just really narrow down all of these perspectives: the theological, the biblical, yeah. Odon?
This is exactly what I intend to do. My presentation was the first part was about the Islamic narrative, and we talked about it for 2 hours, and it raised many questions, and so it leads us into doubting the authenticity of Mecca from a scripture's point of view. And because we have this clue that there is something wrong, then it's a starting point to look at other fields. And this is what I want to do now, or maybe next week, is to investigate some major issues with Mecca, but some major physical issues with Mecca.
Yeah.
I want to start with the climate, its location, the water issues, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, go on.
And I think it's only logical. You see that the Islamic narrative, even with all its scholarship, does not make sense. It seems very weak. So it raised the question about Mecca. And when you look into it, you see that it's impossible, absolutely impossible, that a city could have developed there. It's not possible. It's physically impossible.
Yeah, there's a story I should share. I mean, Ahmad gets on a bus and he blows himself up for Allah. And he gets to paradise. And he says, "Hey, do I get my 72 virgins?" And Allah says, "Yeah, sure, there they are." And the guy turns around and it's 72 of the ugliest hags you've ever seen. And Ahmad is like, "What the hell?" And Allah says to him, like, "Why else do you think they're still virgins?" So,
okay, thank you, Lloyd.
It's a true story.
It's a true story, of course.
No, I mean, look, for me, the fact that the Bible is an archaeological guide, it either inspires archaeological digs and finds, or it explains them, right?
Yeah.
It is used literally to decide where to find things, where to dig. Whereas the Quran has given us I've looked, literally zero archaeological findings, nothing. It has pointed no one to go dig over there in that spot and go find stuff. Literally zero.
And Brother Lloyd, so far we only digged around 5% of the land of Israel. Thousands and thousands of archaeological evidence. All of them approve the Bible to be the true word of God.
And there's more coming out all the time,
Why not they allow us to go to Saudi Arabia, Yusuf, and do some digging?
I was gonna say the same thing. I like the Brother Odin here. the title that he has, The Great Secret of Islam. And I wanted to kind of relate it to the same topic. It's mind-blowing how in Israel you go and you don't even intend to dig anywhere. Like you dig with a spoon, you find something that proves the Bible and the history of the Bible. But in Mecca, you go and build all of these buildings around the Kaaba, which require you to dig with big machinery.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they will have the place closed off for the public, not for the safety of the public, it's for the safety of Islam, because they don't want to find things that disapprove Islam.
Yeah. I mean, they've
So
concreted over the Kaaba.
They-
They've concreted over that. Holy, sorry, go on, Paul.
Yeah, they found absolutely nothing. You've got a cultic site that people used to travel for great distances to make to do their prayers and circumambulate and so on, and not a single shard of bone they've found. You've got a trading center capable, as Odin said, of fielding an army of 10,000 men and not a single coin. A place where nobody ever dropped a coin. I think the only defense one can make for on that point, if one were a traditionalist, would be to say, well, the Muslims are not actually, don't have a greatest record when it comes to sifting the spoil from buildings. So you've got where the Waqf extended the stables of Solomon on the Temple Mount. And they just use bulldozers and put it all into big trucks and took it away and just dumped it somewhere. So they're not always as careful as they might be. But still, you're left with the reality that there's nothing that they've ever found.
But brother, here's how Muslims look at it. Since we found nothing, that is a great evidence that the Quran is true. For example, you read the story. I'm not joking. You read the story about a prophet is named Saleh and the people of Samud. A prophet by the name Sha'ib and the people of Midian. Okay, but different. And Allah said in the verses, and when they were destroyed, nothing was left out of them. So now you go and dig, you find nothing. That is a great evidence that what Allah said in the Quran is true. And the opposite is true. We can go to find the 5 cities, actually 4, were destroyed by Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know there's a big ball of sulfur this big. And we know that archaeologically, yes, there was cities here and they were destroyed. And the evidence is, look, here is the sulfur, which is the punishment God brought onto this people. But Muslims don't use logic. They don't use common sense. Since there was nothing there, that is a great evidence that what Allah said is true. On the other hand, I'm not going to change the subject. You talk about the wall which built by Alexander the Great, Zulkarnain. It's built out of blocks of iron covered with brass or copper. Okay, and Allah said in the Quran that no one will touch it. Nobody can dig a hole in it, and Allah will destroy it in the day of judgment. Good. That means it still exists today. Yes. Where?
Yeah. Where? Good
Right.
question.
Yeah.
But you see, Usama, the thing is, okay, you look for artifacts and archaeology in Mecca, you find nothing. But if you look for Mecca in the Quran, you find something. And what you find is not Mecca, you find Jerusalem. So we have positive evidence that Mecca did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's very,
Amen.
very hard to prove that something did not exist. But with the Jerusalem thesis, we have evidence that it's not about Mecca, but Jerusalem.
I
Yeah.
see your
So
point.
we have evidence. We have found something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we will
Namely,
a bit.
that the city described in the Quran is something else. Something that baffles me particularly with too many people nowadays, that they are not Muslims, but they will see that there is absolutely no evidence for Mecca, but they will still use the standard Islamic narrative, and they will say, well, the standard Islamic narrative says it was massive, but probably it was not massive, it was probably a small city, but they will still conclude Mecca was there, everything happened there, and it's like, but this is not how you do science. All of the evidence indicates it wasn't there. It never happened there. But everybody seems to, or too many people seem to conclude that, okay, well, there will be problems with the narrative, but overall, it was still Mecca. It happened there. It's like, this is not how you do science. You actually look for all of the evidence, and the evidence is very clear. But too many people seem to be very scared
Yeah.
about going down that path.
Right.
Exactly.
Paul, I have a question for you. Since you wrote the Jerusalem thesis, a book, the definitive book on it, what for you is perhaps the one, I know there's many, but to end off with, what is the one thing that led you to believe that there was no Mecca and that Jerusalem was the site of Mecca that they're trying to recreate in Arabia?
Well, when I first started taking an interest in the Quran, the three books by academics that were quite early on in my reading, and it was from these three books that it just cries out Jerusalem. One of them is, my mind's just gone blank for the moment. I could fetch it for you. Is by Daniel Beck, and it mentions it's about the apocalypse in Islam. And the Daniel Beck book makes an absolutely compelling argument.
Evolution of the early Quran.
Sorry?
Evolution of the early Quran.
Yes, yes, that's right. The evolution of the early Quran, and it makes an absolutely compelling case that the early surahs of the Quran are based around the Byzantine-Sasanian War, and in particular the Persians who were invading the Byzantine Empire at the time when traditionally the Quran is being announced. So the Quran is traditionally said Muhammad's supposed to have had his first revelation in 610, and Jerusalem falls to the Persians in 614. Well, that's extraordinarily close and in time. And he makes a case in the first chapter is, I think, a wonderful chapter. Everyone should read it. It's called Maccabees, Not Mecca. And he explains that the companions of the elephant is a reference, is an allusion to the story of Judas Maccabeus when the Seleucids brought up elephants to attack Jerusalem. And there's more to it than that, but that's a simple version. So he persuaded me that the early surahs are all about the war between the Byzantines and the Sasanians, and in particular around the defense of Jerusalem from the pagan Persians, from the Judeo-Christian point of view. The second book that I read is The Quran and the Bible by Gabriel Said Reynolds. Yes, and sorry, I hesitated. Gabriel Said Reynolds, and you read that, and so many, this page after page. My jaw was on the floor reading this for the first time, and you realise just how saturated the Quran is with biblical allusions. Everyone who takes an interest knows that it features biblical characters like Abraham and Moses and Jesus, but the depth and the breadth of the biblical references, very few people seem to appreciate this. But it was clear that the person who wrote the Quran, or the primary prophet, was absolutely enthralled to the biblical story. And the biblical story is all about Jerusalem. It's just not possible that somebody could make these hundreds, maybe thousands of allusions to the Bible, which is all about Jerusalem, and not treat Jerusalem as their special holy place. And the third book is The Death of a Prophet by Stephen Shoemaker, which I think provides an absolutely compelling case that there was a man leading an army in the Middle East at around that time who was calling himself Muhammad, however you vocalize it, but he finds about a dozen sources that all from around across the region, from North Africa, from Palestine, from Armenia, from Persia, and they all talk about this person who many refer to as a religious leader, trying to capture Jerusalem. And you put those three big jigsaw pieces together. You've got somebody who's highly motivated by the Persian attack on Jerusalem. You've got somebody who's absolutely committed to the Bible narrative, the overall Bible story. And you've got the fact that a person with this name was actually trying to capture Jerusalem. And the story tells itself. The Quran is about Jerusalem. And when it says, go and capture the Masjid al-Haram, it's because that's what the guy was actually doing. So, or to summarize it, what was actually probably quite a long answer, to summarize it very shortly, my radical Jerusalem thesis is no more than that the Quran is talking about the place it is talking about, and that Muhammad was trying to capture the place that he was trying to capture.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. That lines up with what Odon says, with what JC says. And even Usama, you're coming around to this idea, and it makes sense to me. And there's also, I see allusions to other issues as well, but this is great. So this was our first episode on this topic. I'm guessing we have so much material. There's enough for several talks. So shall we schedule one for next week, guys? Would that be good with you?
Yeah.
Amen. One down, 300 to go.
No, Usama. No. Yusuf, take him outside, take him for a walk, some fresh air. Okay.
I feel you. I'm struggling with him with the Arabic show too.
So yeah, this is brilliant. And Paul, thank you for coming out of hibernation to join us. It's quite an honor. Thank you. Really great.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure meeting you guys. Apart from Odin, I've never spoken to any of you before. It's been a really good chat. I very much like what we were talking about, particularly this idea of finding the answer, finding this, applying the historical method, taking the polemics and the nonsense out of it, and then drilling down and finding what actually happened. That's what interests me. And it's always great to talk to other kindred spirits, casting a light into the mystery. Yeah,
Kalam El sent apologies. He was delayed at work, so he got home late. So hopefully next week we shall see. But okay, so then same time next week. And Odon, thank you. Always an honor. Always a pleasure. JC, of course. Usama, I see you way too often, I saw you yesterday. And you're back.
God bless you guys. God bless you.
Guys, it's been fantastic. So thank you. Then we'll do this again next week. I'll add your links. Odon, apologies for the oversight. I will arrange this to stream this again on your channel maybe tomorrow. So we'll set that up and we'll send it to you, Lisa. We'll have it as a stream on your channel again. All right. So thank you, guys. Thanks to the audience. Thank you for the engagement. Really appreciate it. God bless everyone, and we'll see you next week on the same topic. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.